Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. In this video, we're going to go over an end-of-life experience similar to a near-death experience of President Jedediah M. Grant. He was second counselor in the first presidency. And so if you want to liken this to our own time, this would be like President Eyring passing away. And it's Brigham Young, the president of the church, and Heber C. Kimball, the first counselor in the first presidency, that's speaking at his funeral. And they shared this experience that he had before he passed away. And there's a lot of details that that is shared about the spirit world, because again, you know, you're probably familiar with this by now if you've been watching my channel, but in case you're new, at the end of life, there's these things that take place that I didn't know about really until this year. They start to have something similar to near-death experiences, but there is a difference. When you get to the end of your life, and it seems like it doesn't matter if it's old age or maybe you have like a terminal illness, people begin to experience these different phenomena, and one of them is called visioning, where you start to see people in the room. And this was caught on video on this channel. This is hospice nurse Julie. I'll put a link for this video in the description box below, but you have this elderly man who's dying and he sees his mom, and it's really amazing watching him like talking to her, calling her attention and saying, "Mom, mom," like a little child. He's like really seeing her. So let's go to my spreadsheet. If you didn't know, I have a spreadsheet called Quotes, Visions, and Visitations. The link to my spreadsheets is in the description box of each video, so you can access this anytime. I would recommend using a laptop or a PC, because then you can double click on the cell that you want to read and the whole thing pops out. And then you can scroll down and read whatever's in there. So I've added this one that we're going to go over. This is 1956. It was likely sometime in November or December. And I've added the category of end of life. So this started out with just visions and visitations, but then I realized that you have these heavenly messengers that show up in dreams, or there's also near-death experiences where people come in contact with people on the other side of the veil. And then you also have end of life, which is different. A near-death experience is typically something that you have as you're progressing through life, and then you come back and then you live out the rest of your life. Whereas end of life, like the name implies, you're at the end of life. You're not coming back. You may kind of like start to transition and kind of go a little bit back and forth, but you are dying. So it's different in that way. At the bottom of my spreadsheet, I have a tally by decade of all the accounts that I've collected of these different things. In first place right now, not that it's a competition, but in the number one spot is the 1830s with 24 visions, visitations, and so on. This one is my first one for the 1850s. At some point, once I finally have the time, which has been really difficult lately, we've been doing a lot of things. It's the end of summer. I'm going to transition this to another spreadsheet along with other information. I'm doing this thing to the right where I'm keeping a tally of the different personages and messengers. Like I'm keeping a list in a tally of all of them that appear. The one person that shows up the most is Jesus Christ, as you may expect. And then after that, Moroni, and then God the Father, and then on down the line. So that's all going to go on a separate spreadsheet at some point. Okay, so here we go. It's the funeral of President Jedediah M. Grant. I first want to read from Brigham Young and what he said, and then the more detailed account comes from President Heber C. Kimball. But Brigham Young says some really interesting things. Okay, so this is at the Tabernacle in Salt Lake. And he starts out by getting upset at the congregation because everyone's like late and it takes forever to get settled in. He says, and there's a reason why I'm sharing this. He says, "We expected that this congregation would have been assembled and seated by 10 o'clock or by 10:15 at the latest. It is now 12, lacking 5 minutes, and near the time when we should be moving to the place of burial. The time is so far now. there's a reason why I'm sharing this. This is just tangential, but something to keep in mind. The time is so far advanced that I shall not presume to answer my feelings in my remarks on this occasion. I expected it to have had time enough to offer some of my feelings and views with regard to the living and the dead. And so he basically says, look, I was going to share a lot more, but we're starting late, so good job, everybody. Okay, but at the end, he does share a lot of interesting things. Do you not think that Brother Jedediah can do more good than he could here? When he was here, the devils had power over his flesh. He warred with them and fought them and said that they were around him by the millions. And he fought them until he overcame them. So it is with you and I. You never felt a pain, an ache, or felt disagreeable or uncomfortable in your bodies and minds, but what an evil spirit was present causing it. Do you realize that the ague or ague, I'm not sure what that word is, the ague, the fever, the chills, the severe pain in the head, the pleurisy, or any pain in the system from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet is put there by the devil. You do not realize this, do you? Now, this is interesting. I'm going to put this on my quotes A through Z spreadsheet. And I believe him. I know that we can explain things. We can look at the environment and we know the way that this world works. Certain things cause sickness and disease. But you have to wonder the hand that Satan played in that thing. Maybe getting you to those things that cause you the disease, leading you to, for example, smoking. Then later you get cancer. But I disagree with President Young. He's a prophet, and I think it's true. That doesn't mean that we can't go to the doctor and we don't have remedies for things, but as to the source, I think he's right. All right, continuing. I say but little about this matter because I do not want you to realize it. When you have the rheumatism, do you realize that the devil put that upon you? No, but you say, I got wet, got cold, and thereby got the rheumatism. The spirits that afflict us and plant disease in our bodies, pain in the system, and finally death, have control over us so far as the flesh is concerned. But when the spirit is unlocked from the body, it is free from the power of death and Satan. Let me just pause right here. That's really interesting in the light of the atonement and the fall, how it's like we're excuse me, we're in this fallen state. See, I'm coughing. We're in this fallen state. And because we're in this fallen state, Satan has some power. In the first place, we're spiritually dead, and we can only overcome that through Christ. He's the only one that can, forgive our sins and all that, and through the Spirit sanctify us. But while we're in this condition, Satan has power over some of these tangible aspects of mortality. So Christ overcame everything, all these things that they can do, as well as death itself, both spiritual and temporal. Okay, so, but when the spirit is unlocked from the body, it is free from the power of death and Satan. And when that body comes up again, it also, with the spirit, will gain the victory over death, hell, and the grave. When the spirit leaves the tabernacle of flesh and goes into the spirit world, it has control over every evil influence with which it comes in contact. And when it takes up the body again, so resurrected, then the body also, with the spirit, will have control over every evil spirit that is in a tabernacle, if there's any such being, just as far as the spirit that has the priesthood had control over evil spirits. Perhaps you do not understand me. Take a spirit that has gone into the spirit world. Does it have control over corruptible bodies? No. It can only act in the capacity of a spirit. Also, to the devils inhabiting these earthly bodies, it cannot control them. It only controls spirits. But when the spirit is again united to the body, that spirit and body unitedly have control over the evil bodies, those controlled by the devil and given over to the devils, if there is any such thing. Resurrected beings have control over matter as well as spirit. Just as a side note, I have an interesting quote from Joseph Fielding Smith where he talks about that fact that, just as you would expect, that resurrected bodies have control over the elements. They can pass through solid objects and things like that. He's talked about that. Okay, Brother Grant's body, which lies here, is useless. It is good for nothing until it is resurrected, and merely needs a place in which to rest. His spirit has not fled beyond the sun. There are millions, now listen to this, there are millions and millions of spirits in these valleys, both good and evil. We are surrounded with more evil spirits than good ones because more wicked than good men have died here. Okay, so this part, he's talking about people that have passed on. They came to earth. They're not the evil spirits that followed Satan in the premortal life. So the ones that are here, and we've read this before on the spreadsheet with another experience, that essentially evil spirit, like people that were wicked in life when they go into the spirit world, if they're still wicked and continue in their ways, they tend to like roam around and like stay around their old houses or places that they liked, and they just cause trouble. Just like evil spirits from the premortal life. It's like they both are able to, cause trouble. Okay, so for instance, thousands and thousands of wicked Lamanites have laid their bodies in these valleys. The spirit of the just and unjust are here. The spirits that were cast out of heaven, which are recorded to have been 1/3 part, were thrust down to this earth and have been here all the time, with Lucifer, the son of the morning, at their head. Okay, so you have like two types of evil spirits. You have the ones that followed Satan, and then you have the ones that did come here, but they were wicked. They passed on, and in the spirit world, which is here on earth, they also cause trouble similar to those other evil spirits. Okay, you and I have yet to deal with evil spirits, but Jedediah has control over them. When we have done with the flesh and have departed to the spirit world, you will find that we are independent of those evil spirits. Thank goodness. But while you are in the flesh, you will suffer by them and cannot control them, only by your faith in the name of Jesus Christ and by the keys of the eternal priesthood. When the spirit is unlocked from the tabernacle, it is as free, pure, holy, and independent of them as the sun is of this earth. Jedediah can now do more for us than he could by longer staying here. Where do you suppose the spirits of our departed friends are? Where they ought to be. They are here, on the other side of the earth, in the East Indies, in Washington, etc. They are controlling the fallen spirits here, or somewhere else. They could not control the spirits of evil men while here, only by faith, but now one of our departed brethren can control millions of disembodied evil spirits. While they were in the flesh, they were afflicted by them. Is this not a great consolation to us? Someone may ask me for the proof of my statements, of course. It's not enough that he's a prophet. And may inquire whether it is in the Bible. Yes, every word of it. I could prove it, every word from that book, but I do not need to go to the Bible. My scripture is within me. Brother Kimball would tell what I will now just touch upon better than I can, for he heard it. I will, however, say a few words about it. A short time before his death, Brother Jedediah went into the world of spirits 2 nights in succession and saw perfect order amongst them. He saw many of the saints whom he was acquainted with, and saw his wife Caroline and his child that was buried on the route across the plains and dug up and eaten by the wolves. She said to him, "Here is my child. You know it was eaten up by the wolves, but it is here and has taken no harm." It was the spirit of the child he saw. He came back to his body, but he did not like to enter it again, for he saw that it was filthy and corrupt. He also told how his brethren and family felt when he told them that he saw what he saw in the spirit world. He said that his friends felt like saying, well, Brother Grant, maybe it is so and maybe it is not so. We do not know anything about it. Of course. Just like when you talk about these things, the second coming or visitations, there's people that just want to ignore it. They think everything's crazy. You know nothing about what I'm telling you concerning the spirit world any more than Brother Grant's friends knew about what he told them. Why? Because we are encumbered with this flesh. We are in darkness. The flesh is the veil that is over the nations, which that's an interesting concept. The flesh is the veil. Have you ever thought about that? The flesh is the veil. When we go from the body, we have eyes to see spiritual things and understand them. Okay. So then at the funeral, it's Heber C. Kimball that spoke. So it's just like, first you have President Nelson that speaks, and then after that you have President Oaks that speaks at the funeral of President Eyring. That's the corresponding members of the first presidency. So this is Heber C. Kimball, first counselor in the first presidency. Okay, now his remarks are much more detailed. I guess he's the one that was there to talk to President Grant and got all these details. It's exciting. Okay. The ideas that Brother Brigham has just advanced are congenial with my feelings, perfectly so. During Brother Grant's brief sickness, I would not believe for one moment that he was going to die, though my feelings would at times incline me to doubt as to his recovery, but I would not give way to them. And now it is only the body that is dead, for his spirit will never die. It has overcome death and hell and laid aside its earthly tenement, that may return to its native element, awaiting the morn of the resurrection when the spirit will receive it in an immortal state, and then have gained the victory over death, hell, and the grave. In regard to the lifeless body that now lies before us, let me tell you that mourning and making a great parade over it is similar to what it would be for me to lament about a house which the occupants had forsaken. I left a house in Nauvoo, but do you suppose that I fret about it? I do not. And what is the use of gathering the bands together and the troops and performing lengthy and pompous ceremonies over a tenement the spirit has left? I would not give a picayune for all your parade. Okay, kind of controversial remarks for a funeral. Not really, but it's kind of bold. I will not stoop to the principle of death. I could weep, but I will not. There's a spirit in me that rises above that feeling, and it is because Jedediah is not dead. I went to see him one day last week, and he reached out his hand and shook hands with me. He could not speak, but he shook hands warmly with me. I felt for him and wanted to raise him up and to have him stay and help us whip the devils and bring to pass righteousness. Why? Because he was valiant, and I loved him. He was a great help to us. And you would be if you were as valiant as he was, which you can be through faithfulness and obedience. I laid my hands upon him and blessed him and asked God to strengthen his lungs that he might be easier. And in 2 or 3 minutes, he raised himself up and talked about an hour as busily as he could, telling me what he had seen and what he understood, until I was afraid he would weary himself when I arose and left him. I want to comment right here. One of the phenomena of the end of life is, can't remember what they call it, but I think it's like it's like a surge of energy. So they'll like be on their deathbed, and then it's common for them to have like a sudden like surge of energy to where they're just like it's like they're perfectly fine. They get up, they walk around, and things are fine. I don't know if they have an explanation for that. A lot of these things they don't have an explanation for. I'm actually going to be interviewing one of my subscribers. Her name is Amanda. She lives in Oklahoma, and she's a hospice nurse. We met her this year, and we're going to talk about this more in depth, but this could be what's going on here with President Grant. He may be experiencing this, like, whatever they call it, the surge at the end of life. So I just think that that's an interesting detail in this story. All right. He said to me, Brother Heber, I have been into the spirit world 2 nights in succession. And of all the dreads that ever came across me, the worst was to have to again return to my body, though I had to do it. But oh, says he, the order and government that were there. When in the spirit world, I saw the order of righteous men and women, beheld them organized in their several grades, and there appeared to be no obstruction to my vision. I could see every man and woman in their grade and order. So that's really interesting. Grades and orders. He could see everyone. That's kind of exciting. I looked to see whether there was any disorder there, but there was none. Neither could I see any death, nor any darkness, disorder, or confusion. He said that the people he saw there were organized in family capacities. And when he looked at them, he saw grade after grade, and all were organized and in perfect harmony. He would mention one item after another and say, why, it is just as Brother Brigham says it is. It is just as he has told us many a time. Now, really quick, this is similar to 2 other experiences where one was they were both near-death experiences. The niece of Lorenzo Snow, President Lorenzo Snow, and then the other one was the stake president of the Boise stake. I can't remember his name. I still haven't transcribed the near-death experience, but he gave a very detailed account of the spirit world. Probably the most detailed that it is the most detailed that I've come across so far. This is probably like the second most detailed, but he talked about that as well. He talked about the fact that everything was so orderly over there, and so did the niece of President Lorenzo Snow. So I think that's interesting. It's just full of order. It's organized, and it's not chaotic like it is here. That is a testimony as to the truth of what Brother Brigham teaches us, and I know it is true, for what little light I have. I saw the righteous gathered together in the spirit world, and there were no wicked spirits among them. He saw his wife. She was the person that came to him. He saw many that he knew, but did not have conversation with any except his wife, Caroline. She came to him, and he said that she looked beautiful and had her little child that died in the plains, or on the plains, in her arms, and said, Mr. Grant, here's little Margaret. You know that the wolves ate her up, but it did not hurt her. Here, she is all right. To my astonishment, he said, when I looked at families, now pay attention to this. This is a warning to all of us. There's some that don't fully understand. And I don't know, maybe you're new to the gospel. I don't know. Maybe it's just a really difficult truth. But you guys, there are consequences to our actions and the way that we live. And it's independent of our family. You are in charge of you. They cannot bring you exaltation. That rests on you in your decisions to conform to the covenants of the gospel and the ordinances, and to endure to the end. Listen, he says, to my astonishment, when I looked at families, there was a deficiency in some. There was a lack. For I saw families that would not be permitted to come and dwell together because they had not honored their calling here. He asked his wife, Caroline, where Joseph and Hiram and Father Smith and others were. She replied, they have gone away ahead to perform and transact business for us. Now, really quick, we've seen in other visions and visitations that they continue to do work after this life, like President Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. We received the detail from President Wilford Woodruff that, like, he was visited by Brigham Young, and it's like he was filling a spot that Joseph Smith had once filled, where he was like overseeing the church. Like, it was his turn. Joseph Smith had been doing it, but now it was President Brigham Young, and he was like overseeing the church from the spirit world. And that it just like continues like that. After Brigham Young, it probably went to John Taylor, and there's like these responsibilities and these things that they're doing over there, which you would probably expect. Okay, so they have gone away ahead to perform and transact business for us. The same as when Brother Brigham and his brethren left winter quarters and came here to search out a home. They came to find a location for their brethren. He also spoke of the buildings he saw there, remarking that the Lord gave Solomon wisdom and poured gold and silver into his hands that he might display his skill and ability, and said that the temple erected by Solomon was much inferior to the most ordinary buildings he saw in the spirit world. That's interesting. In regards to gardens, says Brother Grant, I've seen good gardens on this earth, but I never saw any to compare with those that were there. I saw flowers of numerous kinds, and some with 50 to 100 different colored flowers growing up on one stalk. That is quite the flower or plant. 100 different colors, one plant. We have many kinds of flowers on earth, and I suppose those very articles came from heaven, or they would not be here. After mentioning the things that he had seen, he spoke of how much he disliked to return and resume his body, after having seen the beauty and glory of the spirit world, where the righteous spirits are gathered together. Of course, and that's a common theme between end-of-life experiences and near-death experiences, the dread of having to come back to this place, and the pain of entering the body. All right, continuing. Some may marvel at my speaking about these things, for many profess to believe that we have no spiritual existence. But do you not believe that my spirit was organized before it came to my body here? And do you not think there can be houses and gardens, fruit trees, and every other good thing there? The spirits of those things were made, as well as our spirits, and it follows that they can exist upon the same principle. After speaking of gardens and the beauty of everything there, Brother Grant said he felt extremely sorrowful at having to leave so beautiful a place and come back to earth, for he looked upon his body with loathing, but he was obliged to enter it again. He said that after he came back, he could look upon his family and see the spirit that was in them and the darkness that was in them, and that he conversed with them about the gospel and what they should do. And they replied, well, Brother Grant, perhaps it is so, and perhaps it is not. And said that that was the state of this people to a great extent, for many are full of darkness and will not believe me. That is so sad. I hope that as a church we've progressed from this time, from the 1850s until now. Hopefully there's more people that would believe this. I'm not sure, but it's just sad. The symbolism of people being blind and lame and deaf when Christ came, they literally were, but as he healed them, he took away those things, I think both temporally and spiritually, right? For others that are spiritually blind and deaf. And it's such a sad and frustrating thing to see when people can't seem to comprehend things of the spirit, whether they're things like this, visions, visitations, or whether they're signs of the times, because people are so narrow-minded and so focused on just this world, and they don't comprehend things that are spiritual. They don't broaden their view. They don't grow in the spirit. And so whenever people talk about this stuff to them, it's like a colorblind person who can only see a handful of colors, and you're like, oh yeah, that's yellow over there and that's green. And they're like, oh, that's just silly. That there isn't any yellow or green. I can't see it. Well, it's because you're colorblind. You don't see all the color. You're colorblind. So, okay. I never had a view of the righteous assembling in the spirit world, but I have had a view of the hosts of hell and have seen them as plainly as I see you today. The righteous spirits gather together to prepare and qualify themselves for a future day, and evil spirits have no power over them, though they are constantly striving for the mastery. I've seen evil spirits attempt to overcome those holding the priesthood, and I know how they act. I feel well, and I do not feel to condescend to a spirit of mourning. If I do weep, I will weep for my own sins and not for Jedediah. If he could speak, he would say, "Weep not for me, but weep for your own sins." Before Brother Grant was taken sick, he said that he had unsheathed his sword and that it never should be sheathed again until the enemies of righteousness were subdued, and he fought the devil up to the last and used to proclaim that he should not prevail on this earth. I can say that he left us with his sword unsheathed, and he will help Joseph and Hiram and Willard. That is awesome. I hope that we have that same spirit while we're here on earth, to be righteous, to be a good influence, to lift up others, and help us and others progress and reduce the influence of Satan the best that we can. All right, so that's going to be it for this one. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.